Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Heldt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. This week, our guest is Aaron Cirksena, and he is the founder and CEO of Modern Capital. Welcome, Aaron.
Welcome. Thanks, man. Glad to be on here.
So, Aaron, give us your background kind of before you founded Modern Capital. What did you do before that?
Yeah, so a little bit of background. I actually started my career at Morgan Stanley in the Baltimore, Maryland area. So when I got out of college, that was kind of where I cut my teeth and sort of started my career in just whether you want to call it financial planning, financial advising. I kind of went through their training program, got all of my licenses and things like that. Ended up working on a couple of teams in that office that managed a few $1 billion, a lot of money that was like institutional type of money, like retirement plans, foundations, endowment funds, things like that. And that was kind of where I got my start. And then very soon after that, I kind of realized that being in the big, like sort of wirehouse bank world was probably not where I wanted to keep my career, for the duration going forward. So I pretty soon after that, after about a year and a half of being there, I ended up leaving and going to the independent side of sort of the financial advising space where we weren't affiliated with, say, like a big wirehouse, a company that creates their own products to a degree. So I worked for a independent office in the Annapolis, Maryland area where I'm located. And that was where I really, started out my career in distribution planning for people and mainly focusing on retirement planning.
So, can you tell us, the difference between working with or for a what you called wirehouse versus an independent?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of differences. Whenever you're working for just a big publicly traded company like that, I think there's always going to be a little bit of inherent conflicts of interest, right? Because publicly traded companies, who are they kind of beholden to first? Well, shareholders at the end of the day. And so I think sometimes that could put them in conflict with also being beholden to their end clients, right? Like wealth management clients, financial planning clients. And so you would start to see a lot in the wirehouse world of changing of compensation structures for advisors. And the reason for that was really because, look, upper management could not tell you what to do for a client, right? They can't tell you, you have to sell this or you have to not use this or use more of this versus that. But what they can do is every year, basically, they tend to do this, is change the compensation structures around different tools that you might pull out of your tool belt, right? Or different investments you might use. And so what does that end up doing at the end of the day? It steers the advisors towards using certain things more than other things, or just being more knowledgeable and more adept at certain things than other things, right? And so that's, I think, one of the biggest differences is you kind of in a wirehouse are always going to have a little bit of that conflict of interest, in my opinion. I think out on the independent side, that goes away to a much larger degree, just because you kind of have no bias in the sense of you're not creating any of your own products, right? They're just, you have an open architecture kind of product shelf and you get to choose what products make sense based on what type of clients you have, right? Or what type of situations you're looking at.
Now, you had said something there at the beginning about distribution planning. Can you explain what distribution planning is?
Yeah, I really almost think of it, if you want to think of it like an analogy, it's the journey back down the mountain, right? So like if you're thinking about someone's overall working life and savings life, I kind of think of that as the journey up the mountain, if you will, right? When somebody's maybe in their 20s, 30s, all the way up until they're maybe in their 50s or early 60s before they retire, right? Somebody has generally got a 401k or some type of retirement plan that they're saving into over the course of their life, sort of building up assets, building up a nest egg. And so we really, as a firm, kind of let people either handle that themselves or work with other advisors to handle that, because frankly, it's an easier phase of life. When you're a good saver, it can out earn mistakes you can make along the way. Like if the market gives you bad returns, right? because you're not spending out of your accounts at that phase. We really come into people's lives to help walk them back down the mountain on the other side as they're getting close to and into retirement, because there's a lot more dangers that go into that phase of life than the prior one, right? As soon as you start taking money out of accounts versus putting money into them, well, now if markets have bad return years and we're taking money out, like, it's very much easier to do significant damage to a portfolio in that scenario versus when you're still saving money into it.
So you just said that you guys, I guess, I mean, that your ideal client, I guess, are the people that are close to retirement, and so you're going to help them with that. I guess, how does somebody know how to pick that right advisor, or what are some of the things that they should be looking for? Because it sounds like, you're saying that, hey, you should use one advisor for your growth, and then you should use another different advisor for your retirement age.
Yeah, I think that that's an appropriate thing to do, and it's no different in my mind than, again, if you bring it back to an analogy, like picking a proper setup for whatever the job is, right? Like if you were going to be, driving up a mountain off road, right? You probably wouldn't want to pick a low to the ground sports car to accomplish that job, right? You would probably want to pick an SUV that was higher off the ground, bigger tires, right? Just a proper setup for the job you were trying to accomplish. It's kind of the same way, right? Like you're getting, as you approach and go into retirement, to a different phase of life. There are different rules that apply in that phase of life when it comes to your money and your savings that did not necessarily apply earlier on, like sequence of return risk and a number of other things. And so it's really about just making sure that whoever you're working with is adept at understanding those risks and protecting against them, right? And making sure that that's kind of what they specialize in, is working with people that are at that phase of life. So that's kind of our opinion on it.
So what are some of the things that they should be looking for when they're talking with or interviewing advisors?
Yeah, I think you want to make sure that somebody has a clientele that's been in similar situations to you, right? That you're not the first person that they're dealing with necessarily that's at your stage of life. That's why I say I think it's important to work with somebody where that is kind of the niche that they deal with,
Hmm.
because they're probably, if they're dealing with that many clients at similar stages of life, there's going to be pretty much no situation in that type of person's life that they won't have interacted with already. And so that's kind of the experience you want to have, right? Is making sure that they have sort of a level of expertise in the specific area of, life and stage of life that you're going into. Other than that, I think you want to make sure that it's a good personality fit too, right? That you feel comfortable talking to the person, because you probably will have a long-term relationship with them. You want to make sure that you can both be honest with each other and that you don't ever have to tiptoe around things. And so from there, I think it's important to make sure somebody's independent in my mind, right? That they don't really have like a horse in the race as far as, choosing what tools to use or what investments to use. So being independent is good. And then obviously looking up reviews, right? Seeing what other people have had to say, about the level of service and the level of support that they've gotten from a financial advisor, I think is important.
So what are some of the mistakes that you're seeing people make, when they're, going into the retirement years?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake that we see people make is thinking that the way they should keep their money in the retirement phase of life is the same as the way they've kept it in the accumulation phase, right? And I think it really comes down to people get their brains so trained on, say, the measuring stick of performance being like average rate of return,
Hmm.
right? Like is one thing that people just get very used to when they see a statement of their 401k or anything in the mail. That's usually the first place their eyes go. What's my average rate of return been over this time, this time, this time? That's not the only measuring stick when you go into retirement. And that's kind of what we show people, is that if you do not reallocate your portfolio and get it prepared for the stage of life where you're going to be removing money from it, right, to generate you income by taking withdrawals out, you can cause really catastrophic damage if you happen to go through a bad market year and you haven't prepared for that, right? Because it's going to cause you to be selling things at a loss, which can sort of hemorrhage money out of your portfolio. And it's really the reason why we saw in 2008 and, even 2022, people having to go back to work, right? Whereas if you had just planned on, right, that stage of life and maybe had enough money set aside that was not all subject to market risk, you probably could have weathered those storms and weathered them very easily.
Now, for people that you guys work with, I mean, obviously, if I'm okay, I just retired yesterday. I'm assuming that's not the necessarily the time that you want to meet me to get with you guys. You would want it, before that. Can you kind of explain that process a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that because we do get a lot of people that are right there, right?
Yeah,
They're like, hey, I'm retiring next week. And so I want
right,
to get this stuff figured out. Or some of them that are like, hey, I've already retired. And now I'm kind of trying to backtrack and make sure I'm figuring this stuff out. And so, look, there's nothing wrong with that. It's human nature to kind of not do things until you're like at that precipice moment. But yes, it always helps dramatically if people can start planning ahead of time. I always say the most dangerous points of a retirement journey or retirement planning are 5 years out from retirement and 5 years into retirement. Kind of that 10-year time frame is like the real danger zone. So I always like if we can start talking to people and getting in front of them and putting a plan together, at least the framework of a plan, if we're maybe even 5 years or so out from retirement, because it just gives you a lot more flexibility as far as, the way you can implement things when you still have more time on your side like that.
right, right. Um, what are some of the once somebody gets in retirement and you're dealing with them, what are some of the mistakes that people will make? Because I mean that's what everybody is afraid of is, okay, what about if I make a mistake? So what are some of the, I'm going to say, common mistakes that you see people make, even when they're working with you guys?
Yeah, I think some of the common mistakes that people will make will be not managing taxes along the way in retirement, right? Like not seeing, okay, what different types of buckets of money do I have from a tax perspective and making sure that they're pulling from those tax efficiently. Not having estate plans in place. I've unfortunately seen people pass away where they didn't put estate plans in place. And so money just kind of went through the probate process, which can be a nightmare a lot of times. Other than that, it really comes down to, again, if somebody wasn't working with us or with a good financial advisory firm, not having a proper allocation for that withdrawal phase of life, right? And so they get caught by a bad sequence of return, like what we just saw in 2022. And they're wondering, why is my account down by, 30%, right?
Right,
Well, it's because the market went down significantly. And at the same time that was happening, you were having to sell things to generate the income that you needed. And what does that do? Well, it makes it much harder then for your portfolio to recover, right? Like we as advisors, we know that markets over long periods of time will go up. But
right,
the problem is if we do damage to a portfolio during a down period and we sort of cannibalize our portfolio, well, then we don't have as much money left over to work for us when the market inevitably will recover, right? Like we never debate markets will always recover. But if
right.
we no longer have as much money to work for you when the market does recover, that's how you kind of can cause that long-term damage to a portfolio. And that's really what we're trying to help everybody avoid.
Yeah. So again, I've seen many times, you're talking about the estate planning and things like that, many times where, um, again, it's simple stuff, having beneficiaries named. I mean, the number of times that I've seen it where somebody hasn't had a beneficiary designated, and then that money has to go to their estate or their trust or whatever, and the amount of tax that they end up, or they don't because they're deceased, but that their estate, ends up paying, sometimes is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
why we've actually made it now a part of our process where not only do we coordinate and get people together with both, whether it's our partner CPA firm that we refer people to, or one of our partner estate planning firms that we have a nationwide network throughout the country that works virtually like us. But even if they have their own estate planning attorneys and CPAs that they're working with, we will coordinate and work with them. And we actually cover the cost of those services for our clients. And basically, it's a way that we're making sure for our clients that they are covering those potholes and sort of like checking those boxes off the list so that people don't find themselves in those situations. But that's one of the big benefits I think that we've seen of being virtual is being able to offer not only to provide those services, but also to cover the costs of them for
Yeah.
clients.
Now, this is a little bit further down the road, but when somebody does decease, do you end up still working with the family? And do you kind of, how early do you start that process? Because I mean, obviously death is inevitable.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's something that unfortunately we have to plan for all of our clients. And so whether that means, if we primarily deal with one spouse, making sure that the other spouse always knows to reach out to us if something were to happen, or whether it's working with kids and making sure that proper beneficiaries know to reach out to us if things were to happen. And so we're always doing that. Unfortunately, just when you have a long career in the financial services industry, it's something you are going to have
Right.
gone through a number of times. So it's one of those times where I'm very sensitive to it because it's obviously one of the worst parts of somebody's life that they're going to be going through when a loved one passes away. What can make it exponentially worse is when they feel like they are having to fumble through the process of whether it's probate or getting accounts in their name or just anything that goes through sort of the death claim process when people pass away. And so, really, we try to be there to hold their hand and to really just make sure that we're taking care of all of those things for them, honestly, which is why we like to, again, get in touch with and talk with beneficiaries prior to something like that happening so that they know, look, when it does down the road maybe happen, come to us. We will take care of everything for you. We will fill out all of the paperwork. We will get accounts retitled in the proper names that they should be. We'll make sure that you don't do things that could cause you adverse tax consequences, like all of that stuff. And so we've just found that, again, during a horrible time in somebody's life, it at least provides a little bit of comfort knowing that they don't also have to be worrying about things like that.
Right, right. Um, Kind of changing gears on here a little bit,
Mhm.
from a business side, because you're the founder and been running this business now for a while. Tell me what piece of business advice has someone given you, and it doesn't have to be since you've
Mhm.
been doing this. It could be prior, like that has kind of stuck with you that you try to incorporate in your daily life.
Yeah, honestly, I think one of the best pieces of business advice that I got was actually from one of the the team members at Morgan Stanley that I worked on his team. And he said, look, it looks like you're going to probably have, a pretty significant trajectory in this industry, right? There's obviously a lot of turnover and a lot of sort of fail rate in our industry. He
Mhm.
said, it looks like you're going to have a trajectory in this business. My advice to you would be make sure you build a team around you, right? Be smart enough to know the things you do know, and be smart enough to know the things that you don't know or that you're not going to be the best person for, right, or the expert in. And then make sure to build a team around you that is able to complement you maybe in the areas that you're weak,
Mm.
right? And I think that's one of the big things that I really took to heart when sort of forming and building Modern Capital and the way that we've expanded is that I always want to follow that mindset, right? Of I'm comfortable enough knowing the things that I do well and the things that I'm an expert in and what I'm good at. But if there's ever something that I'm not, I want to be able to have a team member that is going to be an expert in that area, right? So that way we're providing the best possible level of service in all arenas to any clients that we have. And so I think that was a really important piece of advice that he gave me early on.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think that trying to be a jack of all trades is not a good thing, because there's going to be stuff that you're not going to do well, and if you try to do it all, to me, you're not serving the clients
Yeah, and
well. So
it's tough because you find, especially early in a career, you kind of have to do everything yourself, right? And so unfortunately a lot of advisors kind of get used to wearing all hats basically in their business, and some of them never get out of that, right? And it's just whether it's because of not wanting to train people, not knowing how to hire people, like there's a lot of different reasons they don't, sometimes just being a type A person where they like doing things themselves better than
right,
releasing that. But you will start to realize that that can be a hindrance to your business and a hindrance to your clients at the end of the day. And so being able to really view things as a business and say, look, I can't do everything, and being comfortable admitting that, that's when I think you really, start to become more successful, when you can admit that and go out and find people that are going to fit the areas that you might, need.
right, right. So, Aaron, so what have I not asked you that you wish I had?
I think you've gone through most of the things that I would want to cover. I think honestly, I don't know if there was anything. I think maybe has it been odd working in a virtual capacity with people versus the traditional in-person sense? I think that's kind of one of the biggest things that, we tackle with people when they're meeting with us, because I think it is still different for people, right? Like, even
Right.
though we went through COVID and obviously people got comfortable meeting with people over Zoom that they've never met before or that are in different parts of the country, I still think in our business where we're dealing with people's life savings, right? I think there is a little bit of that trust factor still that is built on a handshake, right?
Right.
And meeting somebody in person. And so I think that's one of the biggest differences, at least in the way we operate, and something that people have had to sort of adapt to and get used to. But I do think that once they have gotten used to it and they've seen kind of the efficiency that it brings, right, and that they can meet with us and then kind of get back to living their lives or enjoying their retirement, and it's all very quick and efficient. I think that's kind of what people have appreciated, but it is something that takes a little getting used to still.
Yeah. Now, how has your staff adapted to that? Are they, because it again, I mean, depending on things, I mean, because you guys are not just, local in the Annapolis area, you guys are across many different states. I mean, how have they, worked with each other
Yeah.
um, and with the clients?
Yeah, so it's actually that's one of the most helpful things about being a fully virtual firm the way we are and working nationwide is that from a talent pool perspective, right? When I'm hiring advisors or hiring any staff, I really am looking nationwide, right? For whatever position I'm looking to hire for. So my pool of talent that I can reach for is far, far deeper than if I was only having or only able to look in, let's say, like my local geography, right? In the Annapolis or the Maryland region, even. So
Hmm.
that's actually been very helpful from a hiring perspective is I'm really able to be very selective and make sure that we're bringing on the absolute best talent for whatever type of role we're looking to hire for. But then as far as just making sure people are comfortable interacting, it comes to having good systems in place, right? We really get any people that we're bringing on set up properly. We are sort of very adept now at working remotely and what goes into that, whether from a technology standpoint or just how you run a business like that standpoint.
Right.
And then we still try to get together, right? We have meetings every Friday where basically it's an all hands on deck Friday morning meeting, right? Where we can all go over some coaching tips or, what's working, what's not working. Is there anything additional that we can be helping with? So we still all try and find time to get together and have a little bit of that like office camaraderie, if you will.
Sure. Sure.
No, it is still, a virtual environment. We're all working remotely. So.
Right, great. Aaron, if people like what they hear and they want to reach out to you, they want to find out, get more information on you guys and how you work, how can they find out and find this stuff?
Yeah, so you can go to our website. It's moderncapital.com, spelled MDRNcapital.com, right? So without the vowels. So you can go to our website, you can check us out, you can Google Modern Capital, you can Google myself, and you're going to find a lot of stuff that pops up, whether it's, articles and Kiplinger and Forbes and any of that other stuff that we've been published in. But, Google is your friend. You can search us, you can go to our website, and there's going to be a lot of information you can find. And if you're interested to schedule a meeting, you can certainly do so through there.
Great. Aaron, I really appreciate your time today. I'm sure our listeners have gotten a lot from this, and it's been very helpful. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yep. So this week, our guest was Aaron Cirksena, and he is the founder and CEO of Modern Capital. Thanks. I'll see you guys next week.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.